Going to begin. So welcome everyone. My name is Andrea Loken and I am a union leader. I am the local Teachers Bargaining Unit president for the Ontario Secondary School Teachers Federation in Limestone District 27. And our school board is located, our office is located in Kingston, Ontario, and our district goes up to Sharbot Lake, west to Napanee, and up to Cloyne. OSSTF also represents instructors of adult non-credit programs and also professional student services personnel, and in other districts, many other job classes. In collaboration with our neighbors, OSSTF District 26, we've decided to host a limited 3-part webinar series for our members, but open to all, to discuss some of the issues that are being raised with distance learning in Ontario during this unique situation with physical distancing and the COVID-19 pandemic. We're calling our series Pandemic Ed, which I hope doesn't seem sensational, but instead communicates that this is not situation normal. It is a very unique set of circumstances that we're in. So for our first webinar in this series, we've invited pediatric occupational therapist Cris Rowan. Cris is a biologist, an author, an international speaker. She is CEO and founder of Zonin Programs in BC, and she's a member of the Screens in Schools Committee with Children's Screen Time Action Network. I'm super excited to welcome you, Cris.
Thank you very much.
Next week, I'll just let people know, April 14, we are going to discuss digital privacy with expert Dr. Tommy Cook from the world-class Queen Surveillance Studies Center. And finally, on April 21, we have invited Dr. Behan Farhadi, who will provide a critical lens on e-learning. We'll be recording all these talks and we will make them available after the fact. We'll post links in our Facebook events. So right now, educators are attempting to provide some sort of distance learning over an unknown period of time. They're grappling with using new tools and new modes of delivery. And many of us don't know very much about the impact of these digital tools on our students. So in our first webinar, Cris, we'll discuss the impact of technology on our students as it relates to their health and well-being. And I think this conversation is really needed right now. I think we're way ahead of ourselves with the technology we've been embracing, or in some cases that we've been required to implement. And we haven't taken a critical look at the impact of all this technology on our society and on our students. So before we get started with you, Cris, I should mention that if viewers have questions or comments, they can leave them, put them in the live chat in the YouTube window. And I will, the questions will be monitored and curated, and then they will be, I will ask them of you at the end, Cris. And so I think Chris's presentation is going to take about 45 minutes, and we've got 15 minutes or more. Cris said she'd hang around a bit longer if we wanted for questions. And so, Cris, I've followed your work for a few years. I know that you can shed a lot of light on this for educators, and I'd like to pass it over to you now so you can share your wealth of knowledge with us and hopefully point us in the direction of some solutions. And I think when I spoke with you before doing this, actually I was quite inspired by the sort of direction we could take with this distance ed. So over to you.
Great. Thank you very much. So I've been working in this field, pediatric occupational therapy, for 35 years now, and predominantly in schools. And so I've had the opportunity to witness a significant change in our kids, especially over the last 20 years. And I started asking questions 20 years ago. Back then it was video games and TV of the kids that I was working with, because as an occupational therapist, traditionally we work with children with disabilities and we help them integrate into curriculum, and it's pretty straightforward and understandable. And then I started getting all these referrals like 20 years ago for kids with aggression and self-regulation difficulties and a lot of developmental delay. And we were seeing kids with obesity, that weren't able to access, their PE curriculum and things like that I had never seen before as an occupational therapist. And previously I was actually a fish biologist. So I have a biology BSc as well, and was really kind of like looking at what's going on around our kids. Why are our kids not well, and why are they so unhappy? So diagnoses like depression and anxiety and ADHD and autism all started skyrocketing. And today we have 1 in 6 children between the ages of 8 and 18 in Canada have a diagnosed mental illness. So I was seeing physical things and cognitive issues, impairments, and social difficulties, and I really started looking way back then at what was going on with screens. And so I am here to present, and I'm just getting up my PowerPoint here, what is going on with screens. And I'm going to be walking you through kind of what are some of the things that we're seeing. And understand, please, that 45 minutes, this is like a 3-day workshop that I've crammed into 45 minutes. And Andrea was awesome to help me do that. But I'm going to be skimming pretty fast. You have a PowerPoint PDF that you either have in front of you or you can access that has a more complete and comprehensive presentation, but this is going to be really quick, and I'm just going to be kind of glitzing on the surface. But hopefully our goal is really to try to help you to understand the downside of screens and how we can work to balance screens with healthy activity. Because screens, there's nothing inherently wrong with screens or the devices children access their media content on. It's more how we're managing those devices that becomes problematic. So the first slide is just my credentials, different committees I've worked on. But what we want to look at today is we want to look at how much are kids using and what are the experts saying. So what are our pediatrician communities telling us on what they should be using? I then want to talk about what is this healthy activity. When we talk about that they should be accessing healthy activity, what is it? And how can we, at the end of this 45 minutes, how can you as teachers build that into your curriculum so that when you're using online curriculum, you can actually work to balance and make sure there's enough of this stuff in there that they actually need to grow and succeed.
Cris, I'm going to pause you there because I just had someone tell me that your screen is frozen.
Are they on the goals and so they're not advancing?
Okay. No, I don't know. No, I see the screen. Okay. PowerPoint's a bit off. That's all. But I think again, they've got the main idea from your and they've got the download. So I think it's okay.
At this point, we should be looking at my goals and objectives slide on the PowerPoint. So can someone communicate with Andrea if that is not the case?
Okay.
We're not looking at goals and objectives.
First, I think we're maybe not seeing your full screen, but I think I'll try to find out what's going on, but you just proceed. Yeah, there's your goal. Yeah, I see it.
Okay, I'm going to carry on, but you interrupt me, Andrea. Feel free to interrupt me. Okay, so we're going to look at research in 4 different areas: physical, social, mental, and cognitive. And then we're going to talk about some balanced technology management strategies incorporated into online curriculum. I talk a lot of research. I'm very research evidence. And the research can be found on my website, which is zonin.ca, under a fact sheet section. So again, I'm not looking at tossing out screens. I'm not against screens, but I do propose this use of balancing screens with healthy activity. And so we're going to go into what are those critical factors for growth and success. And I talk to parents and teachers like it's like you're growing a child to be academically successful and be sustainable in our community is really like building a house. It's all about the foundation. So what are those foundational components? So we're going to start with stats. And I'll go right from babies right up to our adult population. So babies are using about 2.5 hours a day. Toddlers, 4.5 hours per day. Children, 7.5 hours per day. Now, this is entertainment-based media content. This has nothing to do with education-based content used in schools. Teens are using 9 hours per day. Adults are using 11 hours per day. So I always say to teachers and parents, like, it's never the child who has the overuse issue. Generally, parents and teachers drive screen use habits, right? So if kids are overusing, generally the teachers and the parents that surround that child are also overusing. And so people kind of are shocked with this 11 hours, but just to show you, this is, I'm not going to go in depth into this slide, but the 2018 is on the top, showing adults 18 and plus are using 11 hours and 6 minutes per day of screen content. A lot of it is live TV, that 4 hours, 10 minutes live TV. So of course we have a population of adults who are being termed screen addicted. So it's greater than 39% of adults are using over 11 hours per day. And that from the research literature is what we're looking at when we're looking at problematic usage. So usage that is impacting on their personal lives, their work lives. They don't have anything else. They don't know of anything else to do other than screens. They're pretty much screen centric. Is about 40% of our adult population. So again, note as a teacher, if you have children who are using a lot, usually the parents pretty screen centric as well. So our experts are our pediatric community, the American Academy of Pediatrics, Canadian Pediatric Society, and what they're saying is the 0 to 2 shouldn't be exposed to any technology, even passive watching, so not being plopped in front of a TV, and I'll get into why later. 3 to 5-year-olds, not more than an hour a day. 6 to 12s, 2 hours per day. 13 to 18, no more than 3 hours per day. And they go on, then they've released more restrictions stating that under 6 shouldn't watch any violent media content. But only 10% of kids are meeting these guidelines. So kids are using a lot. And so as educators, we want to understand that, and that they're using a lot of unsupervised screens. So, you know, the content piece is questionable as to what they're watching and using, and the durations are quite high. And so this is just where we want to kind of benchmark what we're doing. Now, I'm not saying, you know, if teachers look at that and they go, what? You know, if you're, a high school teacher and you're thinking you got to keep it under 3 hours a day with your, your online curriculum, that's not what I'm saying. I'm just telling you what the experts are recommending, and just to note that. So what are these, when I talk about balancing these critical factors, balancing healthy activity with screens, what are they? So what are we looking at in the realm of building a healthy child? So this is a foundational graphic that I use to talk about how can we create a sustainable adult, right? So as kids grow and they age, how can we make sure that we're doing the right things to create a sustainable human being who has optimal development, can pay attention and learn? And so we want to expose kids to these foundational components of movement, touch, human connection, and nature lots when they're very young, and then slowly start backing off of it as they get older. And again, I'll discuss a little bit more of that later when I talk about brain development. But these 4 components activate systems in our bodies that enable the kids to become strong and coordinated, secure, regulated, calm, and focused, and then be able to pay attention and learn and develop optimally. Let's talk about each of those 4. So movement. As soon as a child gets on a screen, they're sedentary. You take the screen away and they start to move. And same with adults, so that's just a basic fact. But what, I'm sorry, my slides are popping around here, but not sure why. So movement has obvious benefits, cardiovascular benefits for obesity and diabetes prevention, which then impact on stroke and heart attack. Movement builds a strong core. From that core comes motor coordination, right to left body, upper to lower, eye to hand, which impacts on printing, literacy, eyes coordinate with eyes for reading literacy. When we move, we develop spatial mapping, which is really important for math and understanding the spatial concepts inherent in math. Movement helps us to pay attention and learn better, and also helps us to feel better. So this graphic shows an fMRI scan of a child sitting quietly, and then a child after a 20-minute walk. And you can see that there's more blood flow to the brain. The red area is basically a brain that's working, that's alive, that's active. And so even getting your kids to, so I don't want you working for longer than half an hour, 45 minutes or an hour, and then you need to get outside and walk, right? You need to get up and move around. So Canada has worked with the US in developing these movement guidelines, and only 13% of our kids, Canadian kids, are actually meeting them. But if we look at the graphic there, kids should be sweating 60 minutes a day. What that means is intense cardiovascular acceleration, deceleration type movements. They should be up and moving around at least a couple hours a day. So they should be intense movement, 1 hour a day, moving in a more slower pace, 2 hours per day, sleeping 9 to 11 hours per night, and sitting less than 2 hours per day of sitting. This is what our Canadian Society for Exercise Physiology is telling us, right? Sitting is bad. So where do you take that? You with your students, can you stand? Is there a bookcase you can put your work on? Can you get on a wobble board while you're standing at the bookcase? Can you stand at a window? But sitting, not good. So we're also seeing a huge rise in developmental delays. So you can see off to the right, developmental disability, 2014, 2015, 2016 is escalating. Autism is escalating. Autism is now 1 in 36. Intellectual disabilities, we're just seeing a lot of delays. And what that means is that our kids' brains and bodies are not getting enough movement, enough physical exercise. Obesity is through the roof. It's termed epidemic in Canada and the US. You can see Canada there is right about in the middle of the graph, is kind of all in line with Spain, right? The countries that are worse than us, or everyone wants to know, is Australia, England, USA, of course, tops everyone with obesity. But these are projected stats, and you can see going up is not a good thing. So movement is important. Touch is important. When we're on a screen, we're usually not touching anybody. We're not hanging together. We might be sitting next to each other on a couch, but we're not giving the kind of touch that really is sustainable, again, to the human species. So touch is a biological need. We know without touch, infants die. It activates a system called the parasympathetic system, which calms the body, lowers adrenaline, lowers cortisol.
Oh, you gotta love the tech. We have just lost Cris for some reason. Let's try to get her back. While we're waiting to see if she can still join this meeting, I am just gonna talk, and I will to entertain some questions if people have them in the live feed. I'm really sorry. This is the first time I've ever done this, and it's very nerve-wracking. So yeah, we will take questions. I will just say that I spoke with the director of our school board just shortly into the pandemic, and I have to say I like the approach our board has taken. The director has made some video messages, and in the last video message I think she produced, she said that I'm going to quote her because I liked what she said. She said, "This is emergency remote learning. This is not continuity of learning that you would receive if you were in our buildings. Taking care of social, physical, and emotional well-being with some opportunity for learning." And I think that we've got to take that to heart right now. I think educators out there, in many cases and in high school, are feeling like um, they have to teach like they were teaching their classes, and in some cases they maybe are through video conferencing and things. And then many of us are sort of tech limited, like me, and we have to learn. That's a huge learning curve. But after talking with Cris Rowan prior to this talk, she was suggesting not only can we incorporate movement and things that are good for brain health into our lessons, we should, because it will help them learn better. And so I think what I'd like to see is everyone have permission to really do something creative, inspire your students to learn on their own and not try to lead them, or let's say, not to do everything you try to do in the classroom, but instead just give them ideas for self-learning. So, oh, there she is. There she is. Perfect. Oh my goodness. Okay, I don't know where we left off, Cris, but it was about 10 minutes ago, I think.
You know what I'm going to do is I think I was into the research, and I was saying to Andrew, I usually don't check my phone during a presentation, but I'm glad I did because I was just talking to no one. So let's jump into what we're going to do because we've got 4 minutes, right? So what are we going to do? So we want, I've hinted at this as we're going through it. What I would love is if you can look at that diagram again of the triangle and the movement, touch, connection, nature, and see where can you build those things into your curriculum. So I don't know if you've actually got this slide, the PowerPoint PDF, but if you don't, I'm just going to kind of fill you in on where I'm heading. So what we want is, before I go into those 4 different areas, what I'd like to do is just kind of talk about what would be great if you could do, would be to bring some of this information to your teams, right, to your students. And what I have put together over the course of 20 years is something called a tech toolkit. I sent it to Andrea. It's a compilation of 75 different handouts, and there's some, 3/4 of them you're not going to find useful, but you're going to find some there that are. There's a video game addiction questionnaire. There's all kinds of different stuff. But there is a handout that actually, it's called Technology Guidelines for Teachers Talking to Students. So it's like, how do you talk to your students about screen overuse? What sort of things might you want to focus on? So we want to talk about duration. We want to talk about content. We want to talk about sleep, or the 3 big ones, right? And movement. How much movement are they getting? So there's a it's like a conversational guideline. You say this, I say that. Like, if the other thing is I create tools constantly. So you have my email on the last slide. If there's something you don't find in the Tech Toolkit that you really want, I have buckets more, right? So if you say, just send me a handout that I can send to my kids, and I don't charge for this service because I then throw it in the Tech Toolkit for future schools, right? So ask for help is what I'm saying. So in this, we want to really help the kids to start looking at, well, how much are you using? Like, everything has a tracker app now. They can find that out. But you as teachers should know how much the other teachers are using, right? So if you're in high school and your kids have 6 or 7 teachers, survey each other and go, like, how much are you going to be doing? Like, how much are you going to be requiring? Because teachers don't talk about this, and they have to really in order to start being more judicious with use. Setting limits is crucial. Is as a school, you should be saying, okay, we're not going to do more than 3 hours a day. That's the American Academy, like pediatrics guidelines. We know the kids are using 9 hours a day at home of entertainment-based screen content. So we're not going to have them online for more. If we don't set a limit, then we've got nothing to strive toward, right? And you're being challenged right now to create this curriculum. And I'm here saying, and let's not do it all online. Let's be creative here and see if we can get some outside stuff happening, some movement-based stuff happening, some human connection, social pieces, right? So we really want to and bring our kids into that. Why should you do all the work, right? So challenge the kids to okay, so I only want you doing 15 minutes on screen for this, so a Google search or something. So how are you going to do the rest of this assignment outside? Throw it on them, get them to be creative with that, right? Creating play-based things into your curriculum is really important too. So if you've got a 60-minute course that you're wanting them to do, there's something that's going to take about 60 minutes. Can you carve out 15 minutes of that to be some sort of play-based, goofy sort of movement outdoor thing, right? So in your handouts there's 100 things to do other than screens. Many of our kids haven't a clue. When you talk about play, and teens don't seem to think that they need to do that, but they really do need to go outside and play. What can they, and this is again another challenge you can create for them, is to develop a plethora of interests other than screens, right? So there's 100 things they can do. There's active activities, resting activities, social activities, and achievement-based activities. And it's just like so an assignment might be that you go away and you figure that out, because 15 minutes out of every hour, I want you doing one of those things. And I want you doing 2 new ones every single day or something, right? I'm just kind of making this up. So with the movement, they should be taking breaks every 20 minutes. Kids shouldn't be sitting sedentary for longer than 20 minutes. So we want to see frequent movement breaks. And there's different types of movement. Again, this is a whole nother workshop. I'm 2 minutes over, so I know I've got to speed up here, but
You're good.
If you're sleepy, you want to activate the vestibular system, which is in the brain. And when you shake it up, it wakes you up, right? So jumping up and down, wobble boards, any of those therapy ball things, the hokey chairs, anything that shakes the vestibular system is going to wake them up. If you want to calm them down, so let's say the kids are really agitated, they sit down, they say to you, I can't sit for longer than 5 minutes. Then we want to activate a different movement system called the proprioceptive system. We want to have them do heavy resistance. So plank is great, it's best, that yoga plank. It really jacks up the resistance, the muscle resistance, and you'll see a lot of draining of excess energy and calmness. So there's examples of a lot of this stuff. Can they, as an assignment, can they plan a team playground? Can they create a really cool garage gym? What would they put in it? Would it have a climbing wall and TRX strapping or whatever? There's a website there called Active for Life that actually has curriculum for teachers on increasing movement-based activities. Increasing touch. Obviously, this is going to be done at home with families, but more rough and tumble play. Have wrestling night in Canada with the younger sibs. Increasing human connection. And so again, try to set, when I say set your limits, it might be that students are required to connect with at least 2 other students every single day. So that you have a movement limit, a human connection limit. And try to get into, can make them have to do phone interviews, make them, neighborhood surveys to, interview their families, set up family histories, but something that's requiring them to socialize with other people, not necessarily face to face, but, can be in groups. So consider doing small group instruction, and again, small group, projects that already talked about that. Pairing up sibs for collaboration, right? Older, the grade 6 could help out the grade 2, or isn't there a grade 10 somewhere that can be, working with this grade 4 who's really struggling with their math. Getting kids to do their chores, getting them to start developing interests in games, getting them to start increasing their access to nature. So again, how can you be creative with your curriculum? And can you make it, the assignment sort of like a scavenger hunt type thing, or a detective sort of kind of game, right? Where they have to figure things out. And can they build something? Could they build like an obstacle course for, I have schools that I work with that are actually doing this. So the high school students are building an obstacle course for the elementary school, right? And they're planning, they have a big planning thing and a big survey thing where they had to survey everybody. All this stuff could be done over the next, 3 months. They could raise the funds for it. They could, even have the materials in place, by September of next year to actually build it, or maybe even start building it. So science, art, reading, all these things can be done outside. Building forts. Kids love to build forts more than anything I have ever found in my life, right up through high school, is fort building. And it can be part of obstacle courses, part of trail making. And this whole fort idea, it's just amazing. Like when I started on this concept, it went crazy, and it depended kind of on the principal. But some of my schools, they've actually built areas, of the areas in the playground that are designated to build forts, right? And there's, in one school, Yakanuki even has like platforms that the principal built, because all the forts kept falling over because there was uneven ground. So, he built these platforms. So can the students actually work on that? Can it be part of a math project? So you're going to make a fort, and I want it to be 6 by 6 by 6. What kind of materials are you going to need? They have to go call the hardware store and source out and how much it's going to cost. So there's a slide that has outdoor school web links that have loads of these ideas. So just in summary, I'm going to move toward summarizing this. We're experiencing what we're calling the tectonic iceberg right now, in the sense of we can see a little bit of the top, but there's a whole bunch of stuff underneath that we haven't, the health and the education systems are just starting to kind of figure out this is a huge issue. And many of the states are actually got more of a problem than we do, and they're moving a little bit faster on resolving it. Many of the health governments have required the education governments to work with the health to ensure that what's happening in schools is not harmful to children, right? So overuse of fast-paced, violent, technologies, we know is really, really bad. And I'm sure you're not using that as you're not doing that sort of thing as a teacher, but really understanding, there's a couple slides that I didn't cover. Really understanding content is key with what you're doing. Duration is key, and age of first entry into screens is key. So remember that rapidly developing brain, we want to get lots of movement, touch, connection, nature when they're really young, and slowly increase the usage of screens in our curriculum.
Okay. Wow. Well, I'm sad to have missed a chunk of the middle of your presentation, and I might just ask you to touch on some of it, because we had to skip over all the mental health stuff and some of the specific health effects, which are so important for us to understand. So just for me, like you mentioned, assign things where they have to get together in groups, so they'd obviously have to do this in virtually. Are you saying that screens can be better if they're interacting with people on those screens?
Absolutely. So, and that's coming straight from the research and from what the Academy of Pediatrics in the US and the Canadian Pediatric Society are saying is, I mean, what they term it like, if it was a parent and a child co-viewing, right? If it's a peer and a peer, you know, that you're working together on a project, right? And so you can just imagine the amount of social, that the interaction that's going to have to happen, right? So I don't mean that you're working together on a project silently, but that you need to get together every day with at least 2 of your classmates and converse around some aspect of your work, right? So we really want to build that model of collaboration. And if there's siblings in the house, that we're promoting that, you know, that there's a designated time where the older brother or sister has to help out the younger, you know, and vice versa somehow, right? And that they've got these opportunities to play, you know. So, and in the tech toolkit, there's even like grids that I've made up where you know, you check off every day you've done, you know, 2 movement or 2 touch or 2 connection or 2 nature activities. And there's a list of 20 examples of what those might be, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, it depends on how much, you know, you want to be monitoring, like scoring all this stuff, right? You know, but possibly they could work whatever they did from that list into a journal, you know, project that they were doing, or, you know, something.
Or they could challenge each other, right? And report to each other. You know, one of the real challenges for educators right now is we've got a divide, because we have some, you know, if you maybe are single and young and you have no kids and you're really savvy with tech, you are at home and you can perhaps deliver some pretty snappy lessons. We have teachers and educational workers at home trying to do their job from home, in some cases counseling, for example, because we have professional student services personnel with young kids or even high needs kids at home. And so that's a huge challenge. So we can't take off our parent hat while we talk about this, because this is now a reality, you know, even of my work environment. I have kids at home who are asking me to help them with their at home learning. And so I guess we're looking for strategies, and I like this. I personally, as a parent, I've got the parent hat on now. I want my kids to be challenged to go and do creative, open-ended things, and not be necessarily bound to, you know, as having to do an assignment that gets handed into a teacher. And I know different parents are different, but I'm telling you from an educator point of view, it's pretty hard to get those students to buy in. I wanted to come back to the relationship piece, because it's in your slides, and I don't know how much you got to talk about it, how much people got to hear about it. But one of the challenges with this distance learning is the relationships are so hard. And if the student doesn't have good relationships at home, how are they going to have those relationships that would motivate them or keep them learning, right? There's I don't know if you have an answer to that. You probably don't, but
well, actually, it's kind of interesting, because like for a while, like I like to say that I have tried every strategy like that I come up with. I've tried every strategy that's failed, like or I've had a lot of things that I've tried that's failed. The thing that has been the most successful is actually, I developed a program called Screen Busters, where we train the teens to actually become the experts in screens, and they understand, you know, how much a kid's using, what are the expert guidelines, how much sleep should they be getting, what type of stuff should they be watching, what shouldn't they be watching, what's mindless content, mindful content. And that has been so successful because we're using a peer model, right? And so I can't stress enough how when we so if you have a team who doesn't have a great relationship with their parents, the teacher could actually be the primary attachment figure in that kid's life, and possibly, hopefully, they've got a few friends or whatever. So because when we ran that program, the hardest obstacle to the Screenbuster program has been to get through to the parents. And so the kids will have these ideas of reducing screen use, and and taking an unplug. We get them to take the unplug challenge. Their mission, should they choose to accept it, is to go a whole weekend without screens, or one 24-hour period without screens. The kids are, and then we make sure they have at least 6 or 7 things they can do other than screens. We spend a lot of time developing that alternate activity piece, and then they go out and they go home, and the parents flip out. Like, what do you mean you're not going to do screens for 20? Like, you can't do that. Like, we all watch everything together as a family, and and they'll come back sometimes in tears, even teens, saying, my mom, she just couldn't handle it that I didn't have my phone. She kept putting my phone in my hand, right? And so I just couldn't do it. So anyway, this is something that I think I love what you're saying, Andrea, because I do think kids are creative. Kids are amazing if we give them, the authority and the freedom to go out and create this new world, right? But if we try to control it and manipulate it and make sure that all the boxes are checked and everything, then we're going to end up with a really frustrated, teen. But building relationships, I think, when we look at the suicide data, escalating depression, anxiety, we really have to build social. I think it's the most important thing. And of course, movement too. Those are the two things. I mean, right. We have kids who are stroking out and having heart attacks, in their late teens. This is unforeseen. We've never seen anything like this in the history of humankind, right? They're not healthy. Our kids are not healthy, and this whole COVID thing is just really attacking, their health dramatically, mental and physical health, right?
Right. One thing you said about the teens going out and becoming the experts, that could really be everyone's first lesson. Could be to ask students to go and become literate in this area, and learn about screen usage and the damage it's doing. I'm going to turn to some of the questions that have come through on the feed and give them to you. And I'll just start with the first question. Is there any research that indicates how much knowledge is retained through online learning?
There, not that I know of. There was a plethora of research that was done back when this all kind of hit the schools. So that was maybe about 7 or 8 years ago. Whole schools went online, right? So there were the cyber schools that were built, and a lot of the kids that weren't functioning well inside of a traditional school model were put into these cyber schools. So basically they logged on in the morning, and there was a teacher that might have 30 kids logged on, and they were supposed to be doing these subjects and stuff. Well, they just crashed, right? So the kids were just logging on, and then they go play video games all day or whatever, and really in defense of the cyber school, the kids that were going into the cyber schools were kids who have huge behavior management issues, learning difficulties, right? They weren't the kids. It's important to know your kids. That's really important, is, do they have screen addictions? Well, then they're not going to do very well, right, in the online learning model. So they crashed, and now we're into something that is uncharted territory, has very little research. The research that is there is industry driven, meaning high conflict of interest. It's like the company that developed the program, whatever it is, has done their research, right? And they've got some doctor, or even the occupational therapists are in on this, to support it. And yet it's not valid research. It's not been replicated. It's not, it would never stand up at a university level. So you guys are really the guinea pigs. Our kids today are the guinea pigs in this area of online learning. And my thoughts are there's it's going to be all over the map. There's going to be kids that are going to do great with it, but they do great with anything, right? So there's the bell curve thing. There's those guys, and then there's kids who have addictions, who have all kinds of learning and mental health issues or whatever, and they're not going to be able to, like, they have to be able to manage this stuff, right? And there's no way they can't even manage feeding themselves, much less their screens. So anyway, they're going to drop off, and then there's this big middle group, right? So I do think that it's important to do. I had a slide in there that talked about the steps of educating, talking to the kids about screens. It's the best we can do at this point, because we've got a 40% parent addiction rate. So we know that 40% of our kids' parents are not managing their screens, their own screens, much less their kids' screens, right? So we can only work with the kids really at this point. And so helping them to understand the downside of screens, helping them to understand content, durations, the importance of sleep, putting the screen, locking the screen up somewhere in a separate room when they go to bed at night. That's where I'm at right now as the way to go forward with this, because although there are parents and teachers obviously that are very interested in this area and managing screens better, there's a lot that aren't too. So if you've got a classroom of kids, you can't treat all the kids individually, right? But really be careful about what you choose in the realm of online content. Programs may look great, but be judicious in assessing the outcome. So you've chosen this piece of online software you're going to use, and they're going to do these certain projects. Look at the outcome, be outcome focused, and say, wow, there was memory, there was a simulation, there was extrapolation, there was application, there were all these things that I want to see in the product. Whoa, the thing they produced was amazing. And 60% of them got it, with that. Then that's looking pretty promising as a tool to use in your repertoire, right? So that's just kind of what I have to say about online learning. It's
right. Well, I think what we're doing is not e-learning right now, but we can send instructions digitally, but as much as possible we should have those instructions take them away from their screens and minimize the amount that they have to work online, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm going to take another question here. What are some properties of screens that cause students to become addicted to them, to online activities?
So pacing is very addictive. The content, the violent content is very addictive. And it's basic psychology. When you use intermittent rewards, that is a key component that game designers use to pull them in. And it's not just game designers, it's social media, it's everything, right? So give an intermittent reward, that'll keep you going. Netflix, Netflix does that thing where it kind of shows you the next thing starting in so many seconds. They've proven that is the best way to keep you logged in, right? So they hire, the industry, the tech industry hires psychologists, and this is a very, very dubious area right now, to create addiction for the product, right? And so the American Psychological Association is actually looking at fining and possibly removing licenses from psychologists that are working in this area, because it is promoting addiction, right? Fortnite is one of the most addictive substances, media substances, I call it substance, out there, because there's intermittent rewards, there's novelty. Novelty is very addictive, right? Because we as humans are very curious, right? And so Fortnite releases a new edition every week, right? There's strategy, There's playing with other players. So if there's a social component in there where you're part of a team, right? And so your clan or whoever it is, you know, you're going to let them down if you go have dinner, right? So I can't let my team down. So those sorts of multiplayer aspects are more addictive. Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to take another question over here. What are some, this maybe seems some of the things you've touched on, but what are some significant limitations to learning complex concepts on screens?
Well, let's just talk about math. One of the areas that I'm seeing a huge problem with is that when we live in a three-dimensional world, right? Like there's space all around us. And I know it's about, you know, whatever, 5 feet to my couch. And, you know, I've mapped this space in my brain. My brain is spatially mapped because I'm in my 60s, right? So I've been doing a lifetime of spatial mapping in a 3D world. So our kids are growing up in a two-dimensional world with a screen fixed distance away from their face, and the eyes are just darting around, you know, on that screen, right? And so we then take that map, that brain that's mapped for 2D, and we try to get it to understand concepts that require three-dimensional thinking, so geometry and so this is one of the biggest things I see, you know, is kids, even little kids, they're memorizing symbols and they're storing those in their brain, but they don't know what those symbols mean. So, you know, this is a 2 plus a 3 equals a 5, right? But they don't have the concept of breadth and width and space to understand what 2 is, right? So they can memorize things, and Math Blaster is certainly used a lot in schools with young kids. You know, they can memorize certain things, but then when they get it to a point where they have to, I call it extrapolate, you know, off the concept, right? When they have to expand and apply that information to a higher level, this is where they get stuck, right? Because we haven't given them enough spatial mapping, right? Where does that happen? When they're out in Little League throwing a ball, you know, they've got to reach that kid over there. They've got to get this much force, right, in order to have it reach the target, and they've got to aim, and you know, so that's something that we really have lost sight of, is the importance of movement in the realm of math, right? And
Like just to synthesize it even, right?
Oh, well, and the ocular, so my eyes are working together. I don't know if you can see this, to follow my finger, right? And they are teaming, right, together. That happens in a 3D world. That happens when I'm hanging upside down from a tree and I'm swinging and my eyes are having to focus here, focus there, look over here. That happens in a 3D world, that coordination of the two eyes together, absolutely integral for reading. Kids I work with, like that play a lot of video games, they're not able to coordinate their two eyes together. They're not able to track a moving object, dislocate, relocate, track again, right eye lead the left eye. You know, that's something, again, that's related to movement, right? So that motor coordination piece is, we got to use those motor units if they're going to talk to each other. And so it has huge translation movement into literacy, printing literacy, reading literacy. So to get the eye to talk to the hand, again, requires practice, lots and lots of practice, right? To get those motor units talking to each other. So I have kids who come in, you know, like in whatever, grade 3 or 4, they've got this low, like schlumpy, you know, trunk tone, and the right side is not coordinating with the left, and the upper body is not talking to the lower body, and they're bumping into things. And then we expect them to print, and we expect them to type, and we expect them to read, and they can't, because their foundations for literacy are not there, right?
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to go to another question. And some of these I think you won't be able to answer because they're sort of education specific, but I'll ask them and then I'll talk about how we can maybe answer them in the future. If we create assignments and tasks that students do offline, how do we assess process learning? And I might just put my own commentary on that. I think in this pandemic, Ed, we need to move off assessment as we know it. I'm not sure we can do authentic assessment as we understand it in our regular classrooms. I think, but if you have ideas about that, let us know. But I think we can have kids just check in. The goal here, I think, is to keep them healthy right now and not so much curriculum content. Do you want to comment on that?
That's awesome. And I wondered too, if you could run small groups. So let's say on video. And now I know some kids are not wanting to be on video, but you can certainly see me, and I don't know if you could assess my processing ability, but you can certainly assess, my participation in the group and by my comments, whether or not I'm getting it. In a small group, I doubt you could do that with your whole classroom, but would that be possible to think about, working with groups of 6, say, for an hour a day, and be, so there you're building that social piece, you're expecting the kids to participate, you're giving them you, and this is so important because they miss you. Your kids miss you, and start to cry, because teachers were so important in my life, and in many ways saved me in many ways, right? And so to lose that connection with your teacher would just be huge for a lot of kids. You're it in the realm of a primary attachment figure. So even if it's just hanging out with them and seeing how they're doing and that sort of thing could be just really, really helpful, and just listening to what it's like for them,
Right. Well, I just think just any lesson at all, as you were talking, made me think you could take any lesson at all and make them accountable to each other by putting them in groups. Like they don't even necessarily have to report back to the teacher all the time. As a final check, maybe yes, but if you had them present challenges for each other, like let's see who can explain this physics. I'm a physics teacher, so this physics concept, pick a physics concept and have them each, teach each other in groups. Take the heat off of the teacher having to assess that. There's some accountability within their groups. I mean, for any of these things, we're talking about probably students with privilege to some degree who have access to ways to connect themselves, which not everyone does. But you get challenged them, I guess, within their families too. So I really liked that earlier. I'm going to see if I can find another question here.
Thinking about, even having forums about how we learn. This is an opportunity to really try some different stuff. So I always talk to teachers and I say, what's your beef? What's your biggest issue right now, right? With your classroom, with your kids? Oftentimes it's they can't pay attention. It's that they have a attention span of a gnat, right? So maybe even having some forums around that, address your burning issues, in a more comprehensive time, because nobody's telling you what you have to do right now, hopefully. I don't know, maybe they are, but coming up with some ways to address that. And so you might have a little biology lesson in there where you're talking about brain development and how kids' frontal lobes are, because I talk to all my kids about this, and I show them, I draw a big graphic of a brain and I show them holes in their frontal lobes, very impactful from too much mindless content, and that's Facebooking, and that's video gaming and porn and everything, right? And so talking about challenging them maybe then to reduce their use of the mindless content and increase their use of the mindful content, and see if they can fill up those holes and see if they can pay attention. So what's their baseline for attention? And I have an attention scale, a linear analog scale that you could use if you like, that just looks at different components of attention. But certainly the breaks, Kaplan's theory of attention is, these movement breaks are very impactful with improving attention, movement, nature. You do those two together and you're going to improve attention. So they could start doing a little experiment. So today I did, 20 minutes of work, and then I did 10 minutes of running around outside, and I produced X amount of work, kind of thing, or I was able to pay attention for this much longer or something. It could all be a very wonderful science experiment or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
But it could really help you then when they come back to the classroom, right? So pick out your thing that's just really irritating you, or was when you were teaching, and see if you can address that.
Right. Okay, I'm going to try, maybe we'll take one more question. I'm not sure how many people are still on. I really appreciate everyone following this. But let's go to one more question here, at least. I've skipped around a bit here, so I'm trying to get one I didn't. It seems that learning online is at best optimal for a limited period of time. Are there any suggestions about how we can integrate your analyses of screen time usage and learning? I think we've gone through a number of things.
Yeah, and again, it depends on the kids, and I don't say chronological age, but developmental age, regarding their sustained attention, right? So if you have an attention deficit kid who has like a sustained attention of about 30 seconds on a topic of choice, that's a really different kid than a kid who could sit down for 20 or 30 minutes and crank out the work, right? So what I prefer is instead of, like I usually say 20 minutes, every 20 minutes there should be a break. It's kind of an average. There's another rule of thumb that you can have sustained attention on a topic of choice 1 minute per year of age. So if you've got 14-year-old kids, then you should expect 14 minutes, of sustained attention. But it's different for every kid, and it's different for you, and it's different for you in the morning as it is in the afternoon. It's different after you've had your coffee and, after you've had your walk outside. So it's what's better. I developed this program called Zone In. What's better is to help kids understand when they're in the zone to learn, and when they're alternatively kind of sleepy, or they're really hyper and they're flitting about, right? And so I gave you, you have a number of slides. So what to do when you're sleepy, activate that vestibular system. Here's a whole bunch of things you can do. What do you do when you're jacked up and super hyper? You got to drain some of the energy, right? So tap into the proprioceptive system. And then kids learn to, what I call, know their zone, right? And then they learn tools and techniques to tone their zone. And that's far more effective. So that you then, as a teacher, it eases it up for you, because you just would say, okay, you guys all got 2 minutes to get your energy in the zone, go. And you could do this during a live 1 hour session, right? You could say, I'm seeing energy all over the map here with, I'm seeing little sleepyheads and little hyper kids. So now that we've taught you these techniques, you choose which one you want to do, whether it's plank or hand push or whatever. But you're responsible for your energy. And I want you to come back to the table, in 2 minutes. So they can go run around the house or whatever, but it takes the onus off you to manage their energy states, right? It's not your job, right? It's their job, and you teach them how.
I see a beautiful opportunity here for integration of phys ed. Like, wow, phys ed teachers, you rock. We need you to give the assigned students these essential tasks and breaks. There's one, you have one slide in your slide deck I'd just like to ask you about before we wrap up, because obviously it's the screens are causing our kids damage, and we want to get them off. But people seem to have forgotten that they can connect to the internet via Ethernet, which is how I'm connected to you. And that's partly to protect my health. And you have a slide in there about the effects of radio frequency, that is specifically the Wi-Fi frequencies on health. Do you want to speak to that briefly?
Yeah, so wireless radiation is what everyone's thought for years, is that it's not harmful because it's not emitting a thermal radiation, right? And so it's not hot. And so, but what they found is that even in very, very low doses, this electromagnetic radiation in very low doses is causing damage to our cells. So what they found is that because it is an energy and it has an impact on the and science teachers would be more interested in this and know more than I do about it, but it's causing the opening of calcium channels in the cell walls. So there's channels that are voltage gated, meaning that when there's electrical stimulation around, and our bodies are electrical, the world is electrical, right? But what is very different about wireless radiation is it's a pulsing radiation. So every time our phone or the iPad's trying to find that signal, it's sending out these pulses. And for some reason, that's having a negative response on our cell structure in that it's opening these calcium channels. And then that causes all kinds of issues, right? So we're having an efflux of calcium, an influx of other things that are coming through the calcium channels. And so the integrity of the cell is not preserved, right? And so that's what is thought to be the mechanism that's causing harm with the electromagnetic radiation. So what I presented in that one slide was that in 2011, the World Health Organization deemed electromagnetic radiation to be a possible carcinogen. It's classified as a 2B, as in boy, carcinogen. So 2A would be probable carcinogen. So it's been classified as a possible. So back in 2011, they kind of went, hey, there might be something here. And so then started all kinds of studies. So there's hundreds, literally, of epidemiological studies that looked at whole populations. So for example, one looked at male laptop users times 20 years and found that male laptop users had higher rates of sperm DNA fragmentation and decreased sperm motility because they were sitting this device right on their laps, right? And for guys, their stuff is on the outside, whereas women are a little more protected because our uterus is on the inside, right? And so there's the World Health Organization, there's these epidemiological studies, and then in 2016, the results of a very large study that was done by the National Toxicology Program down in the US. So that's the National Institute of Health's National Toxicology Program, did massive studies of mice and rats. And they were looking for cancer. So they were exposing mice and rats over the course of a couple of years. Those results were released in the preliminary results released in 2016. So this is like I think it was $30 million study, huge study, and showing that there were some cancers that were related to electromagnetic radiations. Basically, they put a phone in a rat cage and they tried to simulate the size of the rat and the amount of radiation that the phone was emitting, and they were fairly successful at doing that. And so I think it was a 9-hour period of exposure to the radiation. So they found causal links to heart schwannoma, which is, again, that makes sense because the heart has a lot of calcium. And so when you start disrupting the calcium balance in the heart, there's things happen. Like cancer happens when we mess around with that DNA, and we make conditions that are not, perfect for, because our bodies like to be all homeostatically, perfect. And they strive toward that. And when we mess them up, things like cancer happen. So heart schwannomas, brain gliomas and acoustic neuromas were three of the cancers that were found. Again, these are animal studies. So these are what we term experimental studies, right? So the fourth thing that we are seeing is a rise in cancer in humans. So if you go on the Canadian Cancer Society website, they're going to show us that by 2025, 1 in 4 of us will get cancer, and 1 in 2 will, no, sorry, 1 in 2 of us will get cancer, 1 in 4 will die from cancer. So we're seeing a rise in cancer. So when you just kind of add all that stuff up, right? You know, then it just becomes, what I encourage people to pursue is, again, what we term a precautionary principle. So we want to be more careful. We want to make sure that what we're doing is not harming our children. And when you really look at it, this stuff has not been proven to be safe, right? No one's proven it to be safe. And there are many studies showing that it's harmful. And some kids are electrosensitive, and adults as well, meaning that their bodies are more sensitive. It's just like all of us, for, you know, there's people who have allergies, and there's people who don't, and there's people who get COVID, and there's people who don't, you know, so we're all different, and some are more susceptible or sensitive to being affected by the radiation. So there's a lot of reasons to worry about how much we're using this stuff.
So we can turn our devices off, and I think especially at night, right, which is another thing impacting our students' sleep and even our own sleep, is if our devices are on, they're emitting that radiation, and it's decreasing our melatonin production, and just also not having notifications and things at night is a good thing. Are there any other recommendations you have around that? What can people do?
Whole countries have moved forward on this, especially in Europe. So France has banned cell phones and other radiation emitting devices from areas that kids are in. And by bann's a bit of a strong word. Like they've done various different things in different age groups, right? So in the younger ages, daycare, preschool settings, they're banned. But in, you know, high school settings, what they're doing is where there's times during the day that the internet will come on. So like everyone knows, at 1 o'clock, you know, to 2 o'clock, they turn the internet on in the school, and the kids can use their phones and access whatever, and then the rest of the day it's off, right? So
wow,
I think
like a school that actually turns off the Wi-Fi most of the day.
Yes.
Most people would lose their minds.
Well, and you know, can we? So I challenge schools when I do these tech management policy sessions where I kind of do all the, like on a Pro D, like all the information, right? And then we save, you know, a couple hours in the afternoon, just kind of go, okay, so how are we going to manage our screens? So, you know, so I challenge people, do you actually seriously need the internet on every day? You know, could you do a Friday with no screens? And when I bring this forward in kids, when I do tech talks in the classrooms with the kids, they're like, yes, let's do Fridays, no screens, right? And that you can see the teachers going like, are you kidding me? But, you know, but then they remind them, 2010, 2009, we didn't have any of this crap. We didn't, you know, I know you got teacher or parents texting you constantly, and that's the way everyone communicates and stuff, but, you know, it was only 10 years ago that we didn't have all this crap, right? So we've gotten very, very married to this stuff, and our ways of managing it are very, you know, are ridiculous. Like when I do workshops, I usually start by saying, okay, so who in this room is fully in control of their device? Who manages their device like really well? And you know, that means, you know, you're driving the bus. When you decide you don't want to watch another Netflix movie, you don't, you know, you put it away and go to bed. Like, who's in control, right? Generally, there's 2 or 3 people inside of the couple hundred, you know, that put their hand up and firmly put their hand up, right? You know, so, and then I say, well, we're giving these things to 2-year-olds. and 3-year-olds and we're expecting them to manage when we can't, right? So really that's what this is all about, is can we build the management skills of those students and maybe do it during this time of COVID. If we can try to help them to understand a little bit about what's the pull, why are they feeling out of control with the device if they are, and how can we help them is really important.
I like that that last point, during COVID, because I think we do have an opportunity now, and we have a unique time to pause. In a way, I know many of us are very, very busy still, but we have a time to reflect. The world's turned upside down a little bit right now, and so I just really appreciate you bringing this information to us today. And it's there's a lot of uncertainty out there. There's a lot of stress about what's going to happen, but hopefully you've given people some ideas, maybe to push them in directions that are more healthy for students and even for ourselves. And so, I just want to thank you so much for doing this with us today. And I hope we can produce a video out of this that makes sense, since we lost a chunk of the presentation in the middle.
Thank you.
But
we should tape that, and in the future with your fellow next week, Tommy, or
we're gonna have Dr. Thomas Cook
tape the webinar portion, right? So have the person come on, and then I don't know how many people are listening to this, but and then do your taped portion with your guest speaker, and then do the Q&A at the end, right? That might be,
that's a way to do it.
Because it wasn't you or I that did anything that dropped it off, right? It was probably everything, Jitsu, and everybody's so overloaded. Zoom,
technology, right? We're all trying to use it, right? We're all trying to embrace it, but it does fail us sometimes. Just thank you so much, and I want to thank as well the people that helped me put this together, folks from District 26 and from District 27, and we're really grateful. I think we'll sign off with that. Thank you so much, Cris.